Welcome to By-The-Bywater, a podcast on the Megaphonic Network. I'm Ned Raggett.
I'm Oriana Schwint.
I'm Jared Pekacek.
And we're here to talk about all things J.R.R. Tolkien, his work, his inspirations and impact, creative interpretations in other media, languages, lore, rip-offs, parodies, anything we think is interesting. Thanks for joining us. Hello and welcome to the 81st episode of By-The-Bywater. It is great to be back with you all here with the last episode of 2025 being recorded. We're recording this a bit early so we can give ourselves a holiday break. So at this point, we can now say that both Oriana and Jared have incoming promising new mayors. Jared had to wait a little longer for the Seattle results, but congratulations to you both.
It was not a landslide.
Yeah.
And I envy them right now because, again, of course, Oriana's in New York City, Jared's in Seattle. Meanwhile, I'm in San Francisco where the, how can I put it? There was, it would take too long to explain everything, but a gap opened up on the City and County Board of Supervisors, who are kind of the main, people beyond the mayor actually run the city more or less. It's up to him to fill it. Someone approached him at a night market, gave her business card. She ran a pet store. She is only in her late 20s, has never held a government position before of any sort. And so, of course, he appointed her to be the new supervisor. Then within a week's time, it all collapsed because all these messages came out about how the pet store had lots of frozen dead mice somewhere in the back. And she was paying people under the table in violation of various city and state laws. So.
Oh, no.
So it's been fun. So I wish to give you both that your mayors don't do things like this.
Well, I got the Mamdani transition team, solicited resumes, and I and literally 50,000 other people in the city submitted. I'm not holding my breath waiting for an interview. Though if anyone is on the team is listening to this podcast, I would love to be involved.
Hey, you never know. Friends in high places. So anyway, we'll see how it goes, and there we are with that. But good luck wished on that front and all other fronts and things like this. But we might as well just continue on. We do have some news. So Jared, please take it away.
The major news this time out is that the previously announced new Tolkien work, The Bavadium Fragments, edited by Christopher Tolkien and published with a new essay by Richard Ovenden, is now available for reading. More thoughts on that at some later point. On a more serious note, the misreading of Tolkien by Silicon Valley and Trumpy types has gotten so notoriously bad lately, especially after Elon Musk started going on about hobbits and the United Kingdom in his usual hatefully stupid way, that there's been a couple of understandable pieces in response, spelling out things like we did in our own Silicon Valley episode. Offhand, we'll recommend Adam Serwer's Why Elon Musk Needs Dungeons & Dragons to be Racist in The Atlantic, and John Semley's Elon Musk Really Doesn't Get the Lord of the Rings in Wired. We'll have links to that in our show notes. But on an honestly delightful tip, Elijah Wood accidentally crashing a wedding in New Zealand held at the permanent Hobbiton location in Matamata, where filming sequences were done for the Peter Jackson movies, was a bit of a balm to all that terribleness and went viral for a reason. Again, link to that in our show notes.
Yeah, that was really good fun. It was
Very
one of those things
cute.
yes, I will take this. I will.
Yeah.
I will take people nerding out doing the Hobbit thing and all the rest of it if you have Elijah Wood crashing your wedding. Otherwise, we may wonder, but that would be good. But yeah, no, I don't want to spend too much time on the Elon thing and all that.
We do have a whole episode about these chuds.
Yeah, and everything that you said was true, and it's gotten even worse. So there it is.
I'm so tired of it.
Beyond tired. So especially as it's clear over and over again that they saw the movies and they have barely picked up the books.
Yeah, it's so. I hate it when people are wrong about a thing that I love. Like, if you take the wrong lessons away from something, maybe that's on the thing itself. But when you completely misunderstand it and then decide that's what's going on, it drives me up the wall. So I guess that's maybe makes it sound like I'm like, make your racism logical, but that's not what I'm saying.
No, please just go away. That's all we ask.
Stop naming things after Erebor Bank. Oh, God.
Yeah, I do like it. We, I hope, do a good job of talking about the racist undercurrents in Tolkien's work when they are there, and and also embracing the anti-fascist, anti-imperialistic elements of it. And I encourage all our listeners to stand up for the good Tolkien reading. Just if you come across any of these chuds, I hope you take up the gauntlet and put these people in their place with your knowledge if you can. It's important that we don't let these people take this away from us. It's just it's important. There are so many other larger important things, but a small thing that we can do is refuse to let these people co-opt this work. I'm just not going to let them do it.
It's one of those things that, of course, you think about it one way, it can come off as well, did you actually read it and all the rest of it? But I seriously think these days you have to go, did you actually read it? And actually have to drill down. It's sort of at this point, I wouldn't be surprised to have these people are just getting their summaries from ChatGPT or something like that as well.
100%.
Or Reddit, and we're just skipping every fourth word or something. You can read it and come away with
they skipped all the descriptions is my guess. They just kind of honed in on whatever battle sequences they
you cherry pick the Men of the West stuff or whatever, ignore everything else. You can read something and come away with a completely incorrect understanding of it.
Yes,
but it does feel like they're not reading it. So
I'm trying to remember. There is a great quote. I'm going to do my best to immediately try and dig it up right here. Don't think I have it to hand. I'm going to quickly check right here, though. Okay, basically, it's I'm paraphrasing a quote from Le Guin on Tolkien among one of these things. And basically, the paraphrase is, I'm not getting the exact quote, and I'm not immediately finding it. But basically, it was her point that you can't bottle up Tolkien so easily, is what it is. In other words, if you try and sort of think it's always like this, it's and we're seeing an extreme example of it right now. People are just simply running with it and basically putting everything into their own frame of reference. It's that's not you got to be open and honest and grapple with these things, which we think we've been trying to do all this time. On all levels.
In the meantime, it is completely horrifying and incorrect when an organization like the Department of Homeland Security is using a still from the Jackson movies and a quote from the Jackson movies to just do racism. That is incorrect, and it shouldn't be allowed.
Has there been any pushback from Jackson?
I have not personally seen it, but that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. I don't know.
I'm not saying
it's not necessarily his job. I don't know.
Not to sound like I'm throwing him under the bus. If somebody were using my work like this, I would say something. But it's also valid if he's in a hole somewhere ignoring American news. I mean, that's what I would do if I lived us.
Is there more Beatles stuff that he's working on or something?
Yeah.
All I can say is that following enough people on social media from New Zealand, it seems like their own right-wing government isn't much better either right now. So it's a time, folks. It's a time. But as we just talked about in the brief introduction here, hope can awaken, things like that. So, but with that said, we will have to steer clear and get back to our main topic this time. The choice of topic is Jared. So, Jared, the floor is yours.
There was something Oriana was saying a second ago where I was like, that's the perfect segue. I should jump in right now. I didn't do it. And then I didn't do it. But that's fine. That's fine. Before we begin, I want to not correct something from the last episode, but clarify, because this has been bothering me since that recording. In the last episode, I talked about the published letters and their absence of Edith Tolkien, and this is so minor, but again, it has been bothering me for literally a month that I didn't make it clear that I don't think we have a right to those letters. I'm sure they're very personal, and there are reasons they were not included, not least of which is that Tolkien himself would probably have been horrified at their publication.
Yeah.
I only meant to comment on the extent of her absence, which is so broad, it does make me wonder about her side of the story. So, again, I don't think we have a right to his personal papers. But it sounded like I thought that.
I actually didn't. I don't.
To me. and it's been bothering me.
I don't know. I can't speak for our listenership, but Jared, I didn't take that away. But maybe that's just because, like, I kind of know
Right, yeah,
you.
no, I didn't either. Yeah.
No. When I listened to the episode, I was like, wow, I sound like I'm trying to peer into his person. So I just, in case anybody was
It's good
thinking
to clarify. It's good to
It is good to clarify.
Anyway, so forge onward. There's an idea floating around in fiction nowadays, or I suppose in some audiences, that the business of telling a story is to make it as efficient as possible. That, like, a novel is meant to be a device for delivering plot and character, and both of those things should be clear in every respect, no ambiguity or digression. Obviously, as a Tolkien podcast, By-The-Bywater strongly repudiates this view. I'm not going to get into what a story, like, should be doing, because there's no one thing a story should do. Like, there's no one thing a beverage should do. Some drinks are for hydration, others for warmth, some for inebriation, some so you can be trendy, and so on. So saying all stories have to be like this is the same as saying all beverages should be orange juice or whatever. And like a lot of older authors, Tolkien kind of runs aground on this impossible and arbitrary standard. That's why you see so many people going, why couldn't they just take the eagles? And we did a whole episode on why they couldn't just take the eagles. Or like, why couldn't they ride horses? Or why couldn't Gandalf just teleport them there? Because these people think the story is solely about destroying the ring. Which, first of all, show me one smidge of evidence that Gandalf can teleport anyone. Second, this is leaving out that the journey is the point. Like, have you ever heard of a quest? So today, we are talking about journeys, and the temptation to make this intro a really long, arduous one is almost irresistible, but with my, I'll say, my customary heroic resolve, I will not give in. Journeys. Why are they such a staple of fantasy? Why are they specifically part of Lord of the Rings? Why some third thing? They're a staple of fantasy in part because of Lord of the Rings, obviously, but Lord of the Rings is very consciously repurposing much older tropes. Naturally, Tolkien was familiar with medieval romances, which in the old sense is basically just a story where the unreal or bizarre happens, and many of those are journeys, knights going off on quests because they've sworn an oath, or their queen has gone missing, that sort of thing. In many of these cases, the story has to take the form of a journey because the story isn't the plot itself, it's the process of change that accompanies the journey. And a lot of these knights, or whatever, squires, peasants, woodcutters, you know the drill. They started as one thing. Maybe they're too brash or too timid or too peasant or whatever, and end as a better person or a secret aristocrat or whatever. Or they end tragically. The quest is transformation. Rescuing the damsel or destroying the ring is the goal, but it's not the meta reason for the quest's existence. In the case of Lord of the Rings, which is the story of the hobbits, and not the ring itself, this is very clear. It's so clear that I cannot fucking believe we're still having the Eagles conversation after, how long has it been? Since the 50s or what? Like, this is insane. We need to stop. The quest is the maturation of the hobbits. In narrative, this makes them capable of dealing with threats to the Shire. Outside of that, it allows Tolkien to present different modes of being a hero. Like Merry and Pippin end up more martial, more, I guess, political. Sam ends up domestic but ennobled, and Frodo is, in a sense, a failed hero, and the quest has broken him. But a journey is more useful than that. It's great for fantasy because it lets you explore an entire world. In Lord of the Rings, this has an ecological function as we see different environments and gradually understand the threat they all face. Other fantasies use this for, like, sociological or political reasons that Tolkien isn't really interested in. Like, I think a more sociological author would have given us, like, the Haradrim perspective. There are also moral and ethical dimensions that the journey gives us time and space to appreciate, like the complex responses of various human kingdoms to the prospect of war. And there's also mood to consider. In Lord of the Rings, the journey helps produce the mood of melancholy and bittersweetness, which makes the book so powerful. And I'm thinking of scenes like passing through Eregion, where the stones are like lamenting their builders, or reaching Lorien and realizing how bad victory itself will be. And the accumulation of these moments is essential. And you don't have that if they teleport to Mount Doom. The journey also has to be hard, or Frodo's choice is not difficult. If it's just nipping over to Mount Doom, what's the obstacle? What's making him or anyone reluctant? You need time to pass here, not just for Frodo, but as a matter of suspense. What's the point? What is the point in having a corrupting artifact if you don't give it time to corrupt anyone? Why collapse the timeline and remove the temptation and the possibility of choice? Anyway, Sorry. What would be gained by having the Eagles fly the Fellowship to Mordor? Nothing except getting the story done faster, and that is not the goal of telling a story. You do not have Lord of the Rings without the journey. All that being said, first question, what is your favorite insane solution you've seen for how the quest could have been accomplished in just a few days?
Oh. Wow.
Mine is teleportation. I will just say that right now.
I was just going to say
Seeing somebody suggest Gandalf or Galadriel could zap them over to Mordor.
that has to be mine as well, because like you said, Jared, I don't know where anyone is getting this idea that Gandalf, who like is reluctant to start a fire sometimes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I like really not understanding where people are getting this idea that
it's a magical world. Anything can happen.
Right? And it's like, but the that kind of response is definitely coming from like, it's being pulled from other fantasy worlds. It's so clearly not actually being drawn from, experiencing the world of Middle Earth. And it's just like, what is it's very revealing, I think. And like most of the time I see this sort of thing brought up, it's just shitheads, for lack of it. Like, it's just like people trying to be annoying. Yeah, sorry. It's just doo-doo heads being annoying for the sake of being annoying, I think, which is its own it's a whole other can of worms.
That impulse to outsmart the author.
Yes. Yes.
Which is, to me, maybe I'm just a generous and noble soul, but that's not what I read. What?
I mean, in terms of my own answer to this, I don't think I've encountered anything beyond the big two. I've barely encountered the whole teleportation option. It's one of those things I'm just like, if I ever have consciously seen it, it's been like, what? No, go away. So
it is an outlier. I will say it is an outlier.
Yeah.
Most people are saying the Eagles.
Okay, because if I had seen that like directly, I'd be like, no. So at least not the way you're thinking of. The more common thing is, of course, the Eagles, Canard, and I think that's just we've beaten that one to death. So I refuse to countenance it anymore. I will say though that I think. And I think this has to do, there's a lot of different things I could address in terms of what you brought up, Jared, which is great because I already am looking forward to where this episode will go. Let me bring up something I think I was going to bring up at some point along the way, which I brought up before, which I think is very relevant to how a modern audience, but also an audience in the 1950s, but I think even more so now, sees the idea of the journey, is that we live in a society, specifically, we live in the modern technological society of post-World War II, where air travel is quick and relatively easy. People get places very quickly easy. Increasingly with things like, superhighways and things like that, and, more fuel-efficient cars, whatever. Same with driving and all that. You're used to the idea that even if you're on the road and doing, it's a big, long road journey, the fact is that, in California, you can take a day and drive from, say, Los Angeles to San Francisco. And yes, you've taken a whole day. What was that like before that? Trains were your best option, and even that would have taken some time. And even before that, every other option, you're taking time. You are taking time. And for a lot of people, this sense of time taken is removed because it's not directly encountered as much. I'm not saying people don't encounter it, but very rarely do people think about this. Tolkien was from a world where that was just still there. Again, born in the early 1890s. By the time he's in college, the train network of England is very well established and things like that. But it's also the era before cars, when a lot of transit beyond the train station was essentially still horse-driven. You see that in any number of depictions of the time. Cars are still seen as novelties. So therefore, the idea of true rapid speed, aside from trains and steamships, which again are not ripping along necessarily, unless you're talking about really big ones. You put all that together, and you have a sense that the journey in Tolkien, in the Lord of the Rings, takes time because he fully recognized it takes time.
Yes.
It does so in a way that a lot of people do not intrinsically think about how long trips can take and what it means to actually do it by yourself or do it with a small group of people, and you're not riding horses and you're actually walking for most of the time, or you're on a boat or things like that. So which makes when the Fellowship does get a chance to ride horses, as three hunters do when they hit Rohan, for instance, it changes things. All of a sudden you're getting a lot of places much more quickly and you're less tired. You don't have people marveling at you like Amber does, like, how'd you get here so quickly? That seemed to be something that's beyond measure. So when again the horse is like, okay, we're all riding now, everything makes sense now, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on.
Yeah, there's a couple things I want to unpack from that. One is, I think, faster, and it's just this, the ease of travel now, I think, does make people impatient. They see the travel time in Lord of the Rings as wasted time because they don't perceive it as a real thing. I feel like it's a foreign concept by now.
Yeah.
Like if you like Pride and Prejudice or whatever, and Mr. Darcy's like, "What's 50 miles a good road?" And Elizabeth is like, "You're a rich man. You don't understand the issues here." It's like, we don't get it. The other thing is the realism of Middle Earth. It's like if they had managed to scrounge up 9 horses for the 9 members of the Fellowship, that would be notable in this context. That would attract a lot of attention. And he didn't point this out, I think, because he didn't think he needed to. But horses were not something you just had lying around in the eras that he's drawing inspiration from. It would be maybe analogous to showing up in, like, not a Sherman tank or something, but like they were expensive. It's notable that Rohan has this many of them.
Yeah.
And that they are like, they're good, well-bred or whatever. It's unusual to have horses, so they couldn't all ride. That would draw attention. You've got to feed them. There's all of these things that he
There's
thought
a lot
about.
of time involved in, like, you're saving energy, your own personal energy by riding a horse. But time-wise, they need to eat a lot.
And they're not all terrain.
They are not all terrain.
No.
Like, it's actually way less practical than you think.
Yeah, it might, in some ways it might get you there faster. They've got to rest. You can't ride a horse for.
Nope. That's why, like, there were posts, like, in the olden days where, like, you rode to the post and then changed horses because they're not really a ride at a gallop for 30 miles, for a whole day kind of creature. Like,
right, yeah. And when we think about, people think about, the Pony Express is like, guys, they had setups like that back in the Persian Empire.
Yeah.
That's how they were, and that was 2,000 years ago plus. So it just, this is how humanity has done things in that regard. Yeah. You said there were a couple other things that prompted Jared.
It was really just the impatience of a modern audience,
right?
And
right.
This sense of realism, which the journey shift from one kind of realism to talk about to it, like the realism of horses to another sense of realism. You experience the world of Middle Earth this way, in a way that you would not even with horse travel. And that is hugely important, and not for there's this. I know I keep using episodes to like yell at people on the internet, and I should probably stop. But people keep talking about like, he'll spend like pages describing a tree, or like every other paragraph somebody is talking about the history of something or whatever. And that's not really true. He doesn't spend that long on trees. Right. Stop doing that. No, he doesn't talk like that. Anyway, but just like time passing, the time of this journey passing through this world is why it feels so realistic. Partly because like it takes forever to get somewhere, but also you are given time to notice the environment changing. Like the environment around Rivendell is hugely different from the environment around the Shire. It's way different from like Ithilien or whatever, which is why Middle-earth feels so real and why it feels so fragile, because you are witnessing the corruption of the world as you get closer to Mordor. And you lose that not only with teleportation, but in fantasy that is not interested in the ecological or temporal possibilities of a journey. Like, I'm thinking this is unfair to compare, but Sword of Shannara is not it's it's much more interested in moving the plot forward. So the environment is just kind of like, well, whatever is going to be, I guess, sort of cool for this thing to happen in. And that's not really, that's part of why it feels so unreal and so shallow to me, is, again, he's not interested in the time that it takes to do anything. So I keep pontificating. I feel like somebody should jump in at some point and say something.
No. Yeah, your sense about time, I think, is very relevant. I mean, it's interesting how, in a weird sort of way, there's not a converse, analogous maybe, a situation not only with the journey, but with the time spent at stops along the journey. A good example, Rivendell is, of course, one. I mean, the idea that, it's explained in the story. They need to make sure that, in fact, the Nazgul are completely gone, as are their, things. So time is taken to really make sure they can actually leave. That means they have to leave, again, seen to be the dead of winter. It's like, terrible, there we are. But it's not like they can just simply pick up and go. They're taking, Tolkien gives a sense that there's preparation being involved. They're looking at what maps they have. They're trying to figure out the best way forward. Some people who are clearly planning on going all the way are paying more attention to that. Other people, like some of the hobbits, are like, I think we're supposed to go there, as is revealed later on. It's sort of like, like when Merry and Pippin are, I think it was Merry who sort of gives Pippin a little dig, like,
Well, of course it was Merry who looked at the maps.
Yeah, sort of like paying attention.
Not gonna do that.
Yeah. So stuff like that. And you get also the vivid images of like the red star that Frodo sees getting higher and higher in the sky as it goes on. It's a wonderful literary touch, but it also gives a sense of how time has passed. Similarly, the mutable time, you could argue, of Lothlorien is seen to be sort of like weird, but essentially it is a month. They spend a month there. And you're thinking, and if you're going thinking like, Jesus, the big question, you got to get it right there. It's sort of like, no, they've already been through a lot, and they lost a central person who's supposed to be part of this whole thing, they think, with Gandalf being gone. So it's sort of like, yes, take some rest. They've had a long journey already. Take a little time before they see this all to its conclusion. And, you can't argue that, Sauron's about to attack. No, it's the actions of everyone happening that causes things to happen when Sauron finally attacks. It's basically, nothing would have happened until something did happen when people were moving and starting to do things, as it turns out. So you can't, hold it to that either. So,
sorry, Ned.
No, go, please.
There's just we live in an age of instant information. I mean, it's now like a very polluted informational ecosystem.
It's instant, but is it correct?
But we theoretically have access to almost anything we could want to know, that sort of exists in the human record. And I think it's very easy for readers now to not be able to understand why it's such a big deal that they don't have the most complete maps. People don't really know where they're going other than just a vague direction. They don't know, what is the deal with Rohan? Like, are they allied with Saruman? Are they not? Like, are they paying tribute? There are all these decisions in the journey that have to be made that are based on incomplete information or no information at all, and which reveals character. Wow, what a concept. And so I think that's something that some readers probably struggle with quite a bit, is like, well, I just use Google Map. What do you mean? Like, no one really knew where exactly, this, only Gandalf knew where, or Aragorn knew where this place was. Like, people are constantly having to stop and ask for directions to places. I mean, I had to do that as recently as 2017 because I didn't have cell coverage when I was going all around America. There's plenty of places in America that just did not have good cell coverage, and so I just would be trying to get to some place in the middle of absolute nowhere, and I would have to stop and ask people for directions. And I'm actually not very good at following oral directions. I need someone to write them down for me, so that was fun. So I think that actually gave me a much deeper understanding of what many of these characters are going through, was going on a journey, admittedly in a car, so that is pretty different. But in going, I actually have no idea, where this airstream in the middle of the woods is.
Do you remember having to map quest something and then print out the map quest directions?
Yes.
These Stone Age, these arcane times.
Yeah, I actually did buy like an atlas at one point because it was just a lot easier. And everywhere I stopped, and again, this was 2017, I would stop at like welcome center, rest stop type places, and usually there was a paper map, and that saved me sometimes.
It's an extremely privileged position to not have to think about how to get somewhere.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I'll throw in my own analog equivalent. Anybody who was my age or around, older or younger by a bit in Southern California, if you didn't have a Thomas Brothers guide book with you to the SoCal area, you didn't live there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, I knew what it was, and I never drove a car because it's like, okay, it's this one right here. That's how you got around. It was literally the best way to get around, because even a basic map gives it this sheer complexity and your randomness of the LA Basin's street systems. It's like you didn't have that. Boy, no, simple as that. I was thinking as well about how something about the journey is important too. Is also building on the idea of you don't have that information, the journey helps correct misinformation.
I was going to bring that up.
A good example is Rohan, because again, if you're coming to it cold, you don't know anything about Rohan, you haven't seen the films, you don't know. And the first thing you hear about secondhand is that Rohan seems to be treating Gandalf like garbage. The whole thing is like you're getting a horse going away. It's sort of like, huh? And then you further goes along, the Lorien seems to be offhand, is definitely unsure. And there's also in Rivendell the talk, which Boromir hotly denies. The idea is like, it seems like they may be treating with the enemy now or something like that. It's only until we finally get to talk with Éomer that part of the journey happens. And again, skew whiff, it's not the planned journey. They're trying, the three hunters are trying to find Merry and Pippin. And it's only when Éomer is like, no, and we finally get someone on the level. And as we see in this initial, confrontation that we have, the journey reaches this point where we see the three hunters and Éomer clearly like they are butting heads almost, but talk and exchange reveals things that they wouldn't have had that information otherwise. And without that information, who knows what assumptions may have been there. So the journey matters.
Yeah.
Side journeys matter. Side quests matter.
Yeah.
So, very importantly so. They're not just for games.
All quests matter.
Oh, dear.
That's so beautiful.
So what I would like to maybe bring up is, this was discussed to a degree already in Jared's introduction, but I think it is important to recognize, and this sort of ties into what we were all talking about one way or another as well, is that, again, near instant travel or this is a very modern phenomenon. I mean, let's go Gilgamesh. If we want to go back to like earliest recorded epics, what are you talking about? People going long distances to places to do things. The idea that a particular kind of story in human history, however broadly defined, involves the journey is not a sign that the journey was common. It was a sign that the journey was rare, or rather very specialized. It's the type of thing that I'm not going to get into amateur history and sociology here in terms of what migrations and other things occurred. We know that there are societies for whom the journey was much more common. There are the ones that were much more, let's say, sedentary or fixed. It's not simply a case that it was all one or the other, and sometimes it was blended. Nonetheless, you have a case where humanity tends to center around certain familiar patterns, areas, things like this. It's going beyond them, whether it's going beyond, say, your normal migratory pattern if you have a seasonal pattern that you do, or the fact that you live in a town and you farm or you do things there, and now you're doing something very rare and going beyond that. No matter how you define it, its rarity is the thing. And the idea is you're going to some place that's unknown. And however you define the unknown, whether it's a psychic landscape, whether it's meant to be a physical landscape where you don't know what's going on, and you're supposed to be showing your skill or your wits or your combination of both, you're with people, you're on your own. These are things that come down in stories across humanity, for lack of a better term. It is something that is seen as remarkable. It features in there. It's not seen as something as common. Otherwise, all these stories would be like, and then everyone down the road and talk to the guy. We don't get that. Humbaba is not Gilgamesh's buddy next door.
Well, that's in my fanfic.
Yeah. What about Enkidu? Anyway.
Well, they're not buddies.
I know. Skew it. You thought Frodo and Sam couldn't get up to stuff. Let's say, all right.
It's interesting that I just briefly want to bring up a letter that I can't remember what number it is, but he's talking about literally the value of the journey in Lord of the Rings. And he says something like, everybody has gone on a journey, even if it's just to the store. That's not. I don't think that's quite what he says, but I left the book in the other room. But he's bringing that every journey is an opportunity for change and growth, and it doesn't have to be life changing. You're just getting a milk or whatever. But
but it may be.
It takes you out of the familiar, and there is an opportunity for something to happen to you. Again, even if you're just going to the store. I did want to ask, since you brought up Gilgamesh, how do we see Tolkien fitting into or reshaping the quest trope? Because there's a million ways to do it. They're not just... I brought up knights specifically because he was working in the kind of medievalist vein, but there's Gilgamesh, there's the Odyssey, there's... Oh God, so many examples. Anyway, thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think it is interesting if we take one of his prime examples of, like, something that, obviously deeply important to him is something like Beowulf. What's interesting is that in terms of, we don't track Beowulf on his journeys. We track Beowulf at a location, and he goes from a key location, Harrod Hall, to where Grendel's mom is, granted. So there is something with that. But we're not tracking the full journey of Beowulf starting where he's at, coming across the sea and going back. We're with Hrothgar's folks, and Beowulf arrives. And things happen. Whereas, so it's interesting that we have a case where on the one hand, it records an effort, a journey, if you will, and things like this, but it does so in a very particular perspective, in a particular place, where the person comes in and then goes away again. It's the, this is going to sound very bizarre maybe, but there's perhaps something to it. In the same way that the famed Western movie Shane is about the stranger who comes through town and then leaves on his way, and then civilization's still there, a trope which, of course, has been codified and redone 8 million times. To a degree, that's the story of Beowulf. We do, of course, catch up with Beowulf at the end of his life with a different sort of situation, but for the most part, we could be one of those people who's there at a point along the journey. So it's interesting that he didn't take that model for Lord of the Rings. And I'm not saying he ever had to, but it shows that there are other ways to tell the story. So, to maybe tie this back to your question, I think the thing about it would have to be, and this ties in, of course, with so many other comments, that he's it's sort of like what's interesting is that it's not something like the Fairy Queen, say, or Spenser. It's not something like I'm thinking about certain English literature. It's not a knight. It's not sort of something like this. The closest thing to it might be something like Pilgrim's Progress, where the hobbits are everyman. Going through their particular landscape. Obviously, it's a much different kind of an epic in terms of what's happening there. Nonetheless, you don't have a sense that our hero of Pilgrim's Progress is meant to be a mighty figure. They might as well be a hobbit in terms of that sort of scale. So you can say it's an interesting strand that comes from another direction that he's fused into his particular vision of what a quest can contain or focus on.
Yeah, and he's not the only one to kind of democratize it, but
Right.
He may be, if not the most prominent example, a very influential example. Like, none of the hobbits come back and are like, "Oh, I'm king of everything now." Like, the closest you get is Pippin becoming Thane of the Shire. That's not really even it's just a ceremonial thing. They don't gain much more power than they would have initially, because they're all, except for Sam, they're kind of aristocrats or upper classes. They're not like so everyman Pilgrim's Progress type thing. I think that may be part of why everybody insists Lord of the Rings must be an allegory.
There could be that, I don't know, Oriana, do you have any sort of thoughts on
smooth brain?
Never mind.
It is. I am thinking about. I think this is because my Tolkien book club was just talking about the Turin Turambar story in the Silmarillion, and thinking about just the Greek roots of all, for all of the Norse and Germanic roots of Tolkien's work, there is also this Greek root. Beren and Luthien is Orpheus. Gondolin seems to be the Iliad, like Troy, the destruction of Troy-ish. The Lord of the Rings is somewhat Odyssean.
Odyssey.
Yeah. In nature, complete with all these kind of little episodes. So I do like that. I think that's interesting to, the side quest of it all. Interesting because it's very, very similar. We just kind of seem to do that naturally, I guess.
Yeah. Well, what it reminds me of very specifically, or rather in a very specific way, is Argonautica, the story of the hunt for the Golden Fleece.
Yeah.
Right.
And the reason it reminds me of that is, well, it's a quest and there's gold involved and everything. Motley crew of people coming together.
Right.
But Argonautica is much more recent in relative terms.
Yeah.
Than the Odyssey. Like in the Odyssey,
Right.
things just kind of exist and you stumble across them and they help you on your way or hinder you on your way, maybe eat your crewmates. Like it's just kind of one thing after another. I love the Odyssey. This is not a criticism. But Argonautica is centuries later, still like BC, I think. It's Hellenistic, but it comes from a time when people were rationalizing a lot more about their world than Homer was. Quote Homer, whoever Homer was. So there's things like the Argo, the ship in the Argonautica, encounters some of the same things as in the Odyssey. But what happens is they're kind of rationalized in a weird way, like it's a very world-building-y, derogatory, where like
called out.
Yeah, well, like this thing must happen because the gods are actually really big, and that's how they do things. It's because they must be really big. Whereas in Odyssey, Iliad, the gods are just kind of doing whatever. They're zipping around, they're changing size. It doesn't really matter. But Argonautica is like trying to logic things out, and you have things like as the Argo passes through or alongside various interesting locations or marvels or whatever, they kind of go dark. So like whatever made them miraculous stops functioning, which he's kind of giving an origin story for the Mediterranean, because he's like, these things clearly don't exist, so something must have happened along the way. So like there's these clashing rocks that are super dangerous and the Argo makes it through and that breaks the spell. And now they don't do that anymore, and now we have the modern Mediterranean. Like, and that feels very Tolkien to me, where he's like, the magic is going away, partly because of the actions of these people on their quest, until you end up with the age of men and the dominion of men and magic going away and all that. And I don't know that he was influenced by this. I can't remember him ever mentioning it, but the vibe is very similar.
Yeah. I think there's also something to be said for, the conception of mortal man in general is very, men go on a journey when they die. They do not stay within the confines. They leave. And that's what we all do all the time. People used to do it a lot more before the current day where we've kind of mapped everything out. But people did just set off into the unknown. And I think that's just a crucial component of the theology, the metaphysics. Yeah, let's call it the metaphysical reality of Middle Earth.
I think, too, there's, this idea of knowledge / lore / myth / travel guide, how things all blend together to a certain degree. I mean, something like the Aeneid is a classic bespoke epic, and you could argue the whole idea is basically just sort of like, hey, look at this wonderful Mediterranean Sea that's all ours, and all these little spots along the way that we'll eventually conquer.
The gods gave it to us.
Yeah. So that sort of thing. So on the one hand, it's an epic. On the other hand, it's an epic within sort of familiar waters, quite literally, for most of it. So you have that. Thinking in terms of Tolkien's Legendarium, an idea of how people can randomly encounter each other. It's obviously one of the strongest points of the book, and I'm glad at least it surfaced in some form in the extended edition. But when Sam encounters briefly the Haradrim soldier who's just been killed, and the flash through his mind is sort of like, well, where did this person come from? You get a sense of, okay, here were two very long journeys potentially, and they happen to meet right at this point, except one of them is now dead. And the sudden flash of a moment of insight, and it's not too hard to read into that. Tolkien, seeing the idea of a dead German soldier on the lines of World World War I and, doing a one-to-one mapping. It's pretty easy to do. But there's a certain truth to that there where it's sort of like, okay, we've all come from long distances and we met right here. And this is the result of it. And all that. That's sort of like, it's another way to sort of see journeys in a way that, again, are not merely the big epic quest, but also this idea of the individuals finding themselves in this particular point from much disparate spots where you never encountered otherwise. And might there be a different way to have done this? Could that have ever happened? Would it have ever happened? It's sort of this lingering question, you could say, that he doesn't directly delve into, but it's interesting that he suggests it. Even just by example. So thinking about Tolkien as, the founder of modern fantasy and things like this, it's pretty interesting how this distillation of the importance of the journey has played out in different ways. In most obvious Tolkien fantasy, we mentioned good old Terry Brooks. It's one of those things like, you gotta go on a quest. It's like, And the problem is you hit all the familiar beats, sometimes painfully so, and all that. Here's the Horse Society. Here's this, Dinah Wynne Jones, Tough Guide to Fantasyland. Read it if you haven't already. It details all those wonderful things. But I think it's very fascinating and true that one of the most remarkable, and we certainly mentioned this author in this book before plenty of times, post-Tolkien fantasies, in a sense that's actually, someone who published a book after Tolkien did and did something with the form, is something like Watership Down. The idea being that it is an epic quest, but it's rabbits going a few miles. But from the perspective of the rabbits, it's an epic quest, and it is treated as such because they're heading off into the unknown. They don't know what they're going to do. There are threats around corners, et cetera, et cetera. Marvelous book. I could go on. It's this way that's sort of like, it's so overarching, the journey, that I can almost see why there's some people like, why couldn't it be simpler and all that? Because it's so been redone so many times. It's interesting to see where it sort of like fractures in different ways. Another example would be, I'll stop after this, is the original Dragonlance book series, which grew out of a bunch of D&D campaigns. Now, D&D's history with Tolkien and all that is something, but the whole idea is that, okay, these parties did a bunch of individual things and there wasn't any one quest. It's more like, and then they all tried to tie it together into the eventual books that they created, which is its own amusing thing. And, we can obviously see something like Critical Role taking that to an nth degree where the campaign does become the big story, blah, da, da, da. But that's another thing entirely. So I'll stop there.
Well, it does bring me to the thing I kind of wanted to bring up as a wrap-up question, because we are kind of probably getting to that point.
We're getting close. We still got some time.
Yeah. And this might take a while.
Go.
This is obviously the journey, the quest, has been, if not the dominant form of fantasy, certainly a dominant form of fantasy for a really long time.
Yes.
Are there any other modes that you have seen that you want to single out for praise or criticism? I don't know, both. I don't care. It does feel, I will say, before we get to the answers, fantasy has splintered a lot.
Yes.
Over the last 30 years. Maybe more. I don't know. I was a child 30 years ago, so I don't know. So it's no longer quite as Tolkienian as it was for a really long time. So what are we seeing in fantasy?
I mean, if we want to tackle one of the big ones, good old George R.R., while there are unknown lands, he's much more interested in sort of like societies and people functioning in them that are all too well known, is arguably the case. Certainly, the idea is that some characters go beyond where they once knew and find themselves in different areas. Daenerys is a classic example, of course, in this case, but also anybody who's like poking around north of the wall because nobody knows what's north of the wall. But the idea is those are the fringes. Those are things that eventually become, or if he ever finishes the books, will become important to the story, granted, whatever the TV series. But I mean, that's a classic example right there. But there are other ones. I'm trying to think of some good ones I've had to hand. I mean, Present Company included. There's a particular good fantasy novel that came out the other year that didn't involve a real quest at all, if you consider it was all within one self-contained location for the most part, except at the very end.
They do.
Yeah, but it is a journey. It's a journey within that location. Yeah. So would we call it a quest? I leave it to the author. but
yes, it is.
Yes, we should.
Very good. Yeah. Very good. All right, it's a quest. It is. So, but I think and I'll stop after this. Is the idea that there's more of a recognition. I shouldn't say recognition. There's more of an interest in exploring. I mentioned the idea of the side quests, the sidebars, the other things, the idea of something passing through and then continuing on again, and then what is left behind. Something where it seems like the big story is not really the big story, but could be the side stories. Sometimes this is intentionally set up as a side story. You know, someone creates a little sort of side thing, and fanfic is great with that. Tons of that. But there is this idea that part of it is, you know, wanting to play around in the world some more and sometimes trying to make the world seem a little more alien. Other times taking it different ways. Someone like Steven Erickson's Book of the Malazan series and all that, which is the idea it throws you into something you don't even know what's going on, and you're just trying to piece your way together. You know, the only one on the quest is arguably the reader, is trying to figure out everything through context. That's another story. So I could go on there.
We're kind of in an era of, speaking in broad strokes, like nobody yell at me for forgetting something or whatever. We're in a fantasy of smallness. Even, I would argue, George R.R. Martin is in that vein because he's zooming in. It's a broad canvas, but he constantly zooms in on something to explore how that plays out in that location with those characters.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of people who have been influenced by Le Guin in this regard.
Definitely.
Like Tombs of Atuan, truly one of the best fantasy novels ever written, and a lot of people have taken that as a model and been like, we're just going to sit here with these people and just live with them. Or maybe a lot of people have a much more a much bigger impulse towards drama than Le Guin does, and that's fine. So I feel like we're seeing that as and I'm sure it's as a reaction to the grand, like, high fantasy quests that followed in Tolkien's wake, which is fine.
Yeah,
I embrace, you know, everybody do what they want.
There's just no avoiding the journey. You just have to, if you are trying to in any way bring your reader into a world unlike their own and show them this world, you have to have a journey of some kind, whether that journey is metaphysical, you know, it's whether it's through the mind or whatever. You're not avoiding it. It's just going to happen.
Right. Something will occur. I'll offer this up, and I'll have this sort of be my last thought, and then we can, you know, wrap up from there. Is that there could also be the fact that, in keeping, we could say, that, as you noted, Jared, the splintering of the landscape and all that, is that the idea of one locus point of evil, or things you've got to go through to do the thing to make everything right. Well, it's a great model, and it's been used before and all that. Maybe just a lot of people are like, you know, it just isn't that simple. And they would like something more that deals with it in different sorts of ways. How they deal with that can differ in turn, of course. Maybe the focus is more on a person rather than a location or something like that. And maybe the realization is, well, you know, doing the one thing isn't going to solve everything type thing. So, and that, I think, also changes the idea of what the journey is. You know, if there's no place to go to, what do we do instead? How do you use fantasy in that regard? And I think that can be answered in many different interesting ways. And I think some people have chosen to do that and are doing that, especially as it's not solely, but increasingly as we see non-Eurocentric models and linear models be introduced as possibilities for fantasy in the Anglosphere specifically, as that is being taken in more and more. I think we get more interesting and different results. I don't know if you had anything more to add yourself, Oriana, or if your final thoughts then were your final thoughts, or.
I am. So it's funny. I'm reading Rake's Fall, right? But I just started it last night. So
it's so good.
Cool.
It's very, but it feels very, very it feels like one of those books that if I had read the whole thing by now, I could have been like, yes, it breaks the mold and does all these things. But unfortunately, but I feel like Jared, can you tell, like, does it kind of, because it feels very non-traditional in a way that's like delightful.
It's extremely non-traditional. Oh, it's such a hard book to describe because it's very...
Yeah.
So it follows two souls over multiple eras of reincarnation, but that does not accurately describe what's going on, because it's like different worlds, different times.
Yeah.
It's
different realities,
and it's not like the Years of Rice and Salt, which is an alternate history fantasy following, like, I think 5 souls that are constantly reincarnated across a timeline where Europe was decimated by the Black Death, and that's very interested in showing how things develop over time and stuff. And Rake's Fall is just like a mosaic, and you're wandering into a completely different color every time you turn a page.
Yeah.
So it's not doing a quest narrative at all that I can tell. It's a very different book, and is it even fantasy? Like, it's in some ways it's sci-fi. I was also
kind of wondering, because there's
very
technology,
weird book.
like, they have TV. They talk about TV, so like that feels like it would immediately disqualify it as like fantasy.
Well, there's in his other book, The Saint of Bright Doors, which is also really good. The setting is a city where they have like smartphones, but there's also like demons and reincarnation and floating holy men and stuff, and it's fascinating. Yeah. I was going to say something, and
shit, sorry.
No worries. Well, maybe to wrap it up, Jared, any final thoughts on the journey, new versions of it, how it comes back to Tolkien, further thoughts, and why the journey does ultimately remain important?
I mean, I think I said most of the stuff I had to say in my introduction. I'm glad we have gotten through this episode without, so far, making a joke about Journey the band.
Don't worry, Jared. Someday love will find you.
Okay. Well, I don't get that because I have never listened to Journey, except for the one song that everybody knows.
Did you know it through Glee?
No, of course not.
The Sopranos, obviously. No, I'm kidding.
Here we go.
Anyway, I love Journeys, you guys. I love I think, again, just to reiterate, the journey is inextricable from what makes Lord of the Rings great. And looking for a way to tell it faster or more efficiently is missing the point and missing the greatness. So stop trying to get them to fly the eagles to Mordor, everybody. Like, come on. This will be my last words when I die, is like, stop bringing up the fucking eagles.
Remember, folks, it's about the friends we made along the way.
It is, literally. It is.
It's about the fellowship we made along the way.
Yeah.
Yay. All right. Well, choice of episode topic has come around to me. As usual, we're starting off the new year and with that one. So as I've been trying to do, more or less, with that episode, I was trying to do something non-Middle-earth Tolkien related. And admittedly, we have something that has landed in our lap. That is the By-The-Bywater fragments. So we might as well tackle that. But it seems like it's going to be a short work and there may not be as much to say about it in and of itself. It's called the fragments for a reason. However, apparently the whole idea of it is that it was Tolkien complaining about too much development happening around Oxford. So let's use this as a launching point of talking about the By-The-Bywater fragments, but also more widely, Tolkien as environmentalist, question mark. Because we haven't really talked about that. We've certainly talked about his love of nature and land and all that. But what is the case for Tolkien as an environmentalist, and would he recognize himself as that, especially in the modern sense? And there are all sorts of directions. We're talking everything from the tree huggers to, quite frankly, the ethno-fascist view of environmentalism, which is ugly in its own right. And I'm not saying Tolkien held to that, but given what we were just talking about, misreadings of Tolkien, there's all sorts of stuff that can be tackled with there. So By-The-Bywater fragments and Tolkien as environmentalist. That will be our subject for the new year. And it will be the new year. We are recording this, as usual, sometime before Thanksgiving, so we can frankly give ourselves a break over both the big holiday seasons coming up and anything and everything we may or may not be doing there at that time, getting used to winter, and all that stuff. So we hope you make it, by the time this episode's come out, the American Thanksgiving weekend will have happened. We're into the holiday thing after that. It would be nice if it were a better year for the world. Hasn't been, but we wish you all a better new year for sure. We'll be back in that with our latest episode, and we look forward to that. So in the meantime, we'll just wrap up by saying thank you again very much for listening. As always, we are at megaphonic.fm/By-The-Bywater with links to all episodes, including show notes and so forth, and links to where we are on social media. By-The-Bywater is on Blue Sky. We're all there individually as well as various spots around social media in general. You're welcome, as ever, to email us at bythebywater@gmail.com. And if you would like to join the Megaphonic FM Patreon, we highly encourage it. That way you can join our Discord, and that way you can see us, as always, sharing memes and things and stuff more besides, not merely about Tolkien, but about many other things. We've had numerous people join in slowly but surely over the years. It's been great to see. We welcome you all, and we hope more of you can join us. We'd really appreciate it. So until then, until the new year, we will talk to you then. Until next time, see you soon.